so it seems.
Artist Alexandra Skochelenko has been sentenced to 7 years in prison by St. Petersburg's invasion, spreading false information, disinformation.
With autocracy growing, with tyrants on the roll, Balie brings together over 40 international artists, writers and thinkers during Forum on European Culture. We celebrate the subversive power of art and literature and curate works of opposition that preserve the histories autocrats want to erase and imagine the futures they fear.
So my question is, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Art against the tyrants. Not for the faint-hearted.
Good evening and welcome to Techdenkers. I see a few familiar faces who were at the program right before this, and a few new faces, so I'm still gonna explain the series. I'm Rosalie Dielissen, I'm the program editor here at the Balie, and I've had the honor of making this series Techdenkers in collaboration with Agen, where we explore the influence of technology on our democracy, but especially the political parts of democracy, what is happening now. And well, right now, around the world, journalists are being imprisoned, abducted and murdered, and silencing voices and depriving millions of access to crucial public interest information. And according to the International Federation of Journalists, 122 journalists and media professionals were killed in 2024 alone, and this year alone is not even countable. One organization that stands at the front line of this crisis is Forbidden Stories, a non-profit that protects the work of threatened journalists by continuing their investigations. Their message is powerful and clear. Killing a journalist won't kill the story. If one voice is silenced, dozens more will rise to amplify it. In a time when threats to press freedom are more organized and more dangerous than ever, cross-border collaboration has become essential. So tonight we'll really explore how journalists are uniting across borders and across risks to protect the truth. So I'm so very honored to welcome the guests we have tonight. Well, especially Laurent Richard, as going to be a bit nationalistic here, but as a half-French person, I'm very honored that he is here because he is an award-winning investigative journalist, documentary filmmaker, and founder of Forbidden Stories. With more than 25 years of experience, Laurent has led groundbreaking investigations into corruption, surveillance, and human rights abuses. In 2025, Forbidden Stories was awarded the Special Award of the European Press Prize. I'm also very honored to welcome Thomas Muntz. He's editor-in-chief of Investigo and teaches in masterclasses on investigative journalism. Over the past decade, his work has tackled topics ranging from climate and energy to privatization and debt trading. His investigation into the so-called robot judge E-Court earned him an esteemed Jacques van Veen Prize. And finally, guiding us through tonight's conversation is Marcia Luijten. She's writer, journalist, and presenter. She wrote several books on democracy here in the Netherlands and in Africa, where she worked for 6 years in Rwanda and Uganda. Recently, she published Kiezen voor dictatuur of voor democratie, and previously she wrote Het geluk van Limburg, winner of the Brussels Prize. Marcia currently writes a column for the Volkskrant and is a presenter met het oog op morgen. Before I give the floor to her, we're going to watch a video where Forbidden Stories is represented and where you, the audience, gets to know a bit more about Forbidden Stories so that afterwards we can really dive deep into the material. So first I want to give a warm welcome and thank you all.
Hi, good evening. Yeah, what an accomplishment to create this in 10 years' time only. I think it's a thrill and an honor that we have the opportunity to talk to the founder of all this. We will in a minute. Before, let me take you in a zoom out for a minute. Because journalists being targeted is not a standalone thing, of course. It is part of the rise of autocracy. And it increases with the increasing power of populists who are aiming at killing the truth. Actually, that's what they're after. And if you look at a sound democracy, you can see that there are always three bodies or entities that are there to verify or certify the truth. Of course, speaking of truth with a small letter, because our truth is always open for new facts. But these three institutions, they are our judiciary, our science, and our quality journalism. And of course, it's no coincidence that in these times, the three of them are all under attack. And in that light, of course, our guests here tonight, they are working at the front line of our democracy, telling forbidding stories. And we are honored to welcome at the Balie Thomas Muns and Laurent Richard. Laurent, could you please come to the fore? Give him a warm welcome. Here you are. Yeah, Laurent, we've just seen what you're working at, what you're doing every day, but allow me to take it back a little bit to where you actually started. So when you started, did you know from the beginning you were going to be like an investigative journalist?
From the very beginning in my life, you mean?
Well, I mean, like when you were 18 or so.
No, honestly, no. I wanted to become a lawyer first. I wanted to, so I started to study some at the law university.
Still working on the truth, then?
Yeah, all kind of justice. And so, but a friend of mine at some point after 1 year in the university told me, "Do you want to work with me in the radio for as a student?" And I really immediately like this environment of telling some stories, of interviewing people. And then I start becoming a journalist in a local TV station. And then on my own, I wanted to travel a lot and to meet people. And I realized that I love this job. It's about being curious. It's about meeting people. It's about carrying a huge responsibility because you meet people to tell their stories to the others and addressing important issue that matters. And and I start doing stories I wanted to go first to Kashmir and to document the war between India and Pakistan, because my father was having a magazine in the house that I was from National Geographic that I was reading maybe 100 times when I was 12 years old, and then I realized that I can go there as a journalist, and so that's the kind of.
So you had a gene also for adventure, and journalism was fantastic. But then things changed. It was the 7th of January, 10 years ago. That was the day the headquarters of Charlie Hebdo were attacked, and you were actually working on the same floor as the Charlie Hebdo people, and you were actually the first one on the murder scene. How did that affect your work and life, maybe?
Yeah. So that day really changed a lot of things in my life, in my perception of the reality, my perception of the life, and that day I arrived after the attack, 1 minute and a half after the terrorists escaped the building. I was late this morning going to the offices, and I didn't really understand what was happening because I saw my colleagues, my close friends were on the rooftop of my agency where I used to produce my documentaries. And
they escaped?
They were escaping because the terrorists from Al-Qaeda were in the same time killing the people of Charlie Hebdo. So they were. Our door was really next to the door of Charlie Hebdo newsroom, like in the same corridor, and so I was down in the street, and then I immediately saw someone laying down who was already killed. And I didn't really understand what was happening. And then another person arrived. I started thinking about how to help that person, realizing that he was already dead. And then another person arrived, and it was Patrick Pelou, who was both a doctor and a person who was working for Charlie Hebdo as well. And he told me we should go to the Charlie Hebdo newsroom. And I was not understanding at this stage that was an attack run against Charlie Hebdo. So we ran together, until the second floor of the building, and we came inside the newsroom, and then we discover that a lot of people were already dead, and that was. And then I immediately asked for some help from my colleagues who were on the other door, on the other room, to come and to help the survivors. And we did everything we can to find people who were still alive and to do basic things, just to take the hand of someone and saying that the emergency unit will arrive soon, and they arrived in some few seconds after.
And this extraordinary tragedy changed the way you worked. In what respect?
Yeah, it changed. First of all, after that, so I'm a journalist. At that time, I used to. I was producing a documentary on Azerbaijan where I got arrested a few months ago. Then I traveled to Kazakhstan as well. Some friends of mine were arrested in those countries. And a friend of mine was arrested in Azerbaijan, and I was communicating with her quite at the same time through some lawyers by sending some letters, and she was asking me to pursue her work while she was jailed in Azerbaijan into the corruption of European institutions by the Azerbaijani regime. And so Khadija Ismailova was telling me that, and that I received that letter 2 months after the terrorist attack against Charlie Hebdo. So those two events really broke my mind, and I started thinking about after those weeks that was so hard because of the nature of the picture that I've seen, of the sadness that was really invading me. What I can do after that, and what I can do as a journalist after that, and then I start thinking about that letter that Khadija sent me, and I start thinking about why not creating an organization, an international organization whose mission will be to continue the work of people who have been killed, of journalists who have been killed, arrested, jailed, or threatened, so we can keep their stories alive. So
there was a coincidence of these two things.
Coincidence, or whatever we can name that. But I strongly believe at that time that that was my project, and I applied for a fellowship in the US with this idea. I want to create an organization whose mission will be to about doing that. And then I was awarded that fellowship. That was a big chance because I was then having a full year of thinking about crafting the organization from scratch.
And then you had your first case, and that was after the killing of a Maltese journalist. She's called Daphne Caruana Galizia. She was well known, very critical. She was investigative journalist. She was assassinated by a bomb near her home. What happens if someone is arrested or abducted or killed? When do you assess the story? When do you come in?
It depends. Sometimes in the case of Daphne, so Daphne was killed in Malta in October 2017. And that was exactly the time when we were launching officially Forbidden Stories. And I knew Matthew, that we saw in the video, by the way. Matthew is one of the 3 sons of Daphne. And I knew him personally. And the day after the killing of his mother, I called him and we had a conversation. And I told him, I'm about to I just created Forbidden Stories. And if you want, we can, with many partners all around the world, continue the work of your mother. And Matthew was having conversation with other friends of mine at Reuters in Germany, with Bastien de Bermeyer as well. And then he told me that's the only thing that is the most important thing to do is to pursue the work of my mother.
I can imagine.
And so the day after, we team up with 45 journalists from 18 news organizations.
From how many?
18.
18.
18 news organizations, from the New York Times to the Guardian, with journalists in Italy, journalists in Malta, with Jacob Borg from the Times of Malta, with many newspapers, to pursue the work of Daphne. And Daphne was investigating corruption at the highest level of the government.
The Maltese government.
Yeah.
And at that time, do you then already know that you'll be able to finish the story, or is that of no importance that you already know?
That's the complexity of an investigation, that you never know how, if you will succeed, if you will get the final evidence, or who killed Daphne, or what was the story that triggered the assassination order, who is a mastermind, and who are the middlemen. But we were having some leads. And one thing that was very important, that Matthew was in the house of Daphne on the day she was killed. And Daphne received a few weeks before a leak from a company based in Malta who is providing electricity to the entire island. And she was digging into that leak. And so the day after the killing, Matthew sent to the consortium through the Guardian those data sets. And we investigate that, and we already find some interesting leads. So we were basically investigating who was benefiting from corruption schemes inside the government, and we find those guys.
Yeah, excellent. And how do you then find and convince all these other international news organizations to join in?
So, honestly, it was when I was pitching the idea of Forbidden Stories, even before the killing of Daphne or after the killing of Daphne, or every time now a journalist is killed, when we are going to reach, when we're knocking on the door of some partners to say, we would like to partnering with you because you have some knowledge and talents and skills that could be very, very interesting for that kind of investigation. It's not that complicated, because the idea of Forbidden Stories is simple, is important, and it's about doing what we call collaborative journalism.
But do you also find news organizations that refuse?
Yeah, a lot. So it's,
on what ground?
So on one end, some partners will say yes immediately. On the other end, we still see some kind of resistance to that, because the main model that is dominating our field, our sector of journalism, is the lone wolf model.
Sorry, the lone wolf?
The lone wolf model, yeah. You are trained to become a lone wolf. You're trained to be alone with your sources, with your editor, with your story.
And these conflicts.
And you don't want to share the light with others. You want to break the scoop yourself. And there is also a question of ego as well. And the ego in that industry, but in many industries, I guess it's the same, is a component that could be very strong.
I'm a bit surprised, actually. I would have guessed that you would say, no, they don't want to run the risk, because by taking over the story, you do take over the risks, don't you?
Yeah, so we try to explain the benefit that every partners will get from being inside that kind of collaboration, when you are a part of a consortium that is involving 40 journalists from 20 newsrooms, for instance, that we are splitting the work between teams. So we have some teams that specialize in 3D reconstruction, other ones will have some very good sources in the intelligence community, for instance. So then you have to do your stories based on the work of others, and you are contributing by yourself. So that's great for the reader, because at the end you have a story that is full of facts, that is fact-checked by 40 news organizations, and it's providing protection, because it doesn't make sense to kill reporters if we have 49 to work on.
So you're actually spreading the risk.
We are spreading the risk. We are providing much more resources, because we are a lot of journalists working on the same story, and we are providing impact as well. We are publishing the same story, or a set of series of stories at the same time, same second, same hour, all over the planet. So you are bringing the story on the table, and the story that others wanted to silence. So by doing that, we make sure that people get access to the stories of Daphne, what she was investigating, on that company that was providing electricity and the corruption behind. And in the meantime, we are sending the signal to those who try to kill Daphne, who killed Daphne, to say that you kill her, but it didn't work.
No. Maybe that's the strongest thing in your proposition of Forbidden Stories. You say, if you kill the messenger, it will carry the story only further.
Yes, that's how Forbidden Stories is very different from other organizations. That I believe that it's important and it's crucial to do advocacy work. It's crucial to organize protests, to ask of government to investigate the killing of some journalists, of course. But I believe that more and more, especially in that period of time where we are named as the enemy of the people, that...
When was that? In the beginning, like 2018?
Yeah, so Daphne was killed in 2017, yeah. But then with during the first Trump presidency, the first one, he was already saying that the journalists were the enemy of the people. And so I believe that the killers, they don't care too much about the statement. They are, when you look at the level of impunity, that is around 90%, yeah. 90%, in 90% of the case of the killing of journalists worldwide, yeah. You will never find the mastermind. The mastermind will never be prosecuted. When you look at that number, that gives you an idea about how much they really do care about that kind of campaign. Those campaigns are very important, but I believe that they are way more scary about having their own crimes exposed, either it's about corruption crimes or human rights abuses or environmental crimes, for instance, exposed on the front page of so many newspapers, yeah. then having some statements. So I believe that journalism is the best way to defend journalism.
Yeah. So by having so many news organizations involved, you amplify the way you can publish later. But there's also another thing. I can imagine that it is also like a heavy emotional weight to take over the work of somebody who has been killed. Do you, by that, diminish the emotional weight if you spread that amongst 20 people?
No, I think it's impossible to divide the emotions when we are pursuing the work of someone who has been killed.
Does it affect you, or do you look at it purely professionally, like I'm going to finish this story and that's what I'm focusing on?
We do our best, but I will be lying if I would say that it doesn't affect me anymore, because one of the latest projects we did was the Victoria project. We pursued the work of one Ukrainian journalist who was killed in September 24, and she died in captivity in Russia. And she was the only Ukrainian reporter who was reporting inside occupied territory, investigating war crimes committed against civilians, and she was investigating the status of more than 20,000 civilians from Ukraine who are currently jailed in prisons in Russia. And she wanted to reveal that, but she died because of her investigation. So, and then the body of Victoria recently came back without any eyes, without the brain, without the larynx, because they wanted to delete any kind of traces of the cause of the death. And so we investigate with 50 journalists. We were able to collect many testimonies of former prisoners to question them that, have you seen Victoria in your jail? Because she had been jailed in many prisons in Russia and in occupied territory. And so we tried to reveal what happened to her during her life and after her life and the reasons of her death. So the emotion of that we are carry on. Of course, we are 50. Of course, we are a team of women and men that we all believe that it's so crucial to do that. It's still hard. Still difficult. Yeah. My team is a team, so we employ 20 person in Paris, and then we have correspondents in the world. But it's the average age of my team is around 28, 29, 30. And so it's hard, and so we provide of course psychological support to any of our employees. But it's always hard because it's always starting with the killing of someone. The killer is still free. The investigation will be dangerous. And so that's a lot. In the meantime, just to end on the positive things at some point, in the meantime, by working together, by creating that group of people that used to sometimes be the competitors. And we put all of them in the same room, working together for the same goal, for the same story. And having 3 publications from Germany, 2 from the UK, 2 from the US, working together.
That is an extraordinary thing.
Yeah, we did the Gaza project with both Israeli and Palestinian journalists. In the Victoria project, we worked with the Russian journalists living in exile and Ukrainian reporters. And so that is giving me hope as well.
Good.
And providing energy.
Before we are calling for Thomas to join us on stage, a final thing. You created another instrument that seems to be very effective, the SafeBox Network. Can you briefly explain what that is?
Yes, briefly. So it's a mechanism that journalists who are under threat, journalists got killed because of the story they are about to publish. But if we ensure the survival of the story, whatever happens, then the killer will think twice before killing, because they will understand that if forbidden stories is behind, is having a backup of that story, and then will be pursuing whatever happens to the story and will be amplifying the precise things they don't want to see on the surface, then they will think twice.
And do you see that it is like a sort of safeguard for these journalists? It is.
It is. This is what... so at the time of the video, there were 150. Now we have more than 200 journalists who are using the SafeBox network on a daily basis from all the continents, from all the countries. And now we are receiving requests from journalists in the US to use the SafeBox network because they are afraid to cross the border as well. So this is really new, innovative, and so the journalists. There are 2 things that are very important: is first to protect your ongoing investigation, and then to let your enemies or your adversaries or the people you are investigating, the people who might be killing you, arresting you, threatening you, to let them know that you are not anymore alone. And I know that, and we all know that what is killing journalists is isolation. And when you look at the profile of journalists who have been killed in any kind of places, most of the time it's journalists who are very isolated. And so if we break that, if we reconnect them with other newsrooms who are not that at risk, and if we act in solidarity, then we can protect the information for the public interest.
Beautiful, thank you. Thomas, please come to the stage. Thomas Muns is joining us. He's the editor-in-chief of Investigo, teaches in annual masterclasses like Rosalie told us. He masterclasses in investigative journalism. Thomas, welcome. Give him a warm applause. Yeah, Rosalie started this evening with this incredible number. 122 journalists were killed last year worldwide. We wanted to start now with looking at a little video. History for journalists. Thomas, you work in the Netherlands. Do you experience journalism is getting under pressure, or do you suffer less from all this?
Yeah. To be completely up, what an act to follow. Journalism is more under pressure. Yes, I think I concur with that statement. But of course, I don't know how you view this, Laurent. But you go to these global conferences with our colleagues, Global Investigative Journalism Conference, for instance, and you sit with other people from Western Europe, Northwestern Europe, in a conference hall, and then there's a Russian colleague in exile on the stage, and she apologizes, saying, "My voice is still very weak because I was poisoned last month," and every time you think like you're in such another profession than I am. I mean, we're both on the Global Investigative Journalism Conference, but it's such a profoundly different thing to be an investigative reporter in a country with a rule of law, with a perfect or imperfect democracy, a perfect or imperfect rule of law, in a sense that if you do most journalism here in the Netherlands, you are actually part of this ecosystem that you sketched at the beginning of your presentation of organizations, the judiciary, science, journalism that are concerned with establishing truth.
But nevertheless,
and then having responses in institutions. However, that can come under pressure more and more. And in the Netherlands, of course, we've seen that. I mean, Peter de Vries was, of course, gunned down. I think you can see the place from
But we
here.
have political leaders attacking objective
Yeah, which
facts
is
and
something
truth.
different from what happened to Peter de Vries, of course.
Of course.
We have, I think there's one threat of political leaders sort of creating this, the risk of stochastic attacks, of stoking up the fire, where at some point someone will, which happened, push over your van.
And delegitimizing,
and delegitimizing
judiciary,
it.
science, and
Yeah,
journalism.
yeah.
Thomas, how do you relate to the work of Laurent?
In what sense?
I mean, as being
Professionally.
investigo. Yeah, professionally.
Yeah, we I think at the beginning we had contact, and you had a request that we couldn't deliver, I think, at that point, which is interesting because it's also something about how we work. We work with mostly with public records and that sort of stuff, and I think you wanted someone who could contact you with the intelligence services, and we couldn't deliver at that point. I was thinking about this. What are the kinds of investigations that brush up to what you do? We do all sorts of things. Most of it is just checking, is being holding public bodies accountable. So that's usually very non-violent. If you look at policy gone wrong, and even things that the horrible cases of discrimination, but they're not. Very violent. However,
you also participated.
We participate, for instance, with OCCRP, which is also, I guess, an organization you guys work a lot with. For instance, on the Dubai Unveiled investigations. That was something we were a partner in. It was a very interesting investigation where I'm going to say this in Dutch, kadaster. Was leaked of Dubai was leaked to Norwegian colleagues of us. And the interesting thing is that Dubai is, as you might know, is a tax haven, and it's a bit of a free haven as well. So there's no public record of who lives there. Nobody pays taxes, so there's no public record of who pays taxes. The only thing that the Dubai government has, except for the fact that it's a bit of a repressive state with a good intelligence apparatus, is cadastre. Who owns what? And it got leaked, and we analyzed it for which Dutch people of interest we might find. It was very interesting. We found, of course, entrepreneurs, famous sports people, and then at some point we brushed up against the meanest man in the business at that point. At the point that we did the analysis, Ridwan Taghi, who is, of course, considered responsible for killing Peter de Vries, he was in jail. He was already extradited.
He still is in jail.
And he still is in jail, as far as we know. And but his close successors and runner-ups, a bunch of them we found in.
But the Taghi organization actually is really violent and dangerous.
Extremely violent.
So working on that case
and extremely ahead of Dutch government. I think that's something that few people realize unless you're really into it. Is that I think there's a bunch of good. One really good thing, if you want to go into that, is a Financial Times podcast called Hot Money, and that starts out with Paul Vugts, the Amsterdam-based crime reporter, and it starts out with some things he knows and some leads he sees and some things he follows up, and at the moment he starts to pull on some threads in what would become the Taghi organization. Dutch government has no idea how big this is. But doing that research and finding those records, you suddenly go into a whole different protocol. Like,
exactly.
okay, for instance, if you read that article that we published on it, we don't name the criminals. We mention that there are criminals. Notice that I'm not naming them now because there's a live stream. We do actually explicitly state in the article that we saw into the records and we don't have them anymore, which is true. We destroyed them because you don't want to have your house burgled or
office attacked
or have public prosecution entering your offices.
So you're very aware of security. Laurent, I can imagine you are as well. You've got all these young reporters working for you, very engaged, but also very young. How do you help them and how do you protect them? Because you're also working on these kind of risky stories all the time.
Yeah, so there are we are always doing some kind of what we call risk assessment on the physical, on the legal, on the digital attacks as well. When we were running the Pegasus project, we were basically investigating the misuse of the spyware called Pegasus against dozens of thousands of people all around the world. Who were spied on by many state actors who were using that spyware sold by the NSO group. And so...
Because target with journalists and politicians.
Yeah, absolutely. Targeting journalists, politicians, opponents, dissidents abroad. The Azerbaijani government were using that, the Saudis as well. We were the entire government in France were spied on. We found the cell phone of the phone number of Emmanuel Macron, the president, the French president,
was
in
infected.
The list. And so and we were the ones calling the president, say we find your phone number on the list, and you might be surveilled. And say who you are. We are journalists.
So that was a high-risk project.
So that was a very difficult project in terms of risk assessment. So how to run a project with 80 journalists coming from many countries, from India to the US. And staying under the radar of the people that we were investigating were basically the most offensive secret services around in the world. And so from countries who are killing journalists.
The spyware came from secret services?
Yeah, there is a private company called NSO Group selling that to state actors, so the Saudis, Azerbaijan, Mexico, and then they are using that spyware to target the people they want without any kind of control.
But we don't have the time to completely detail out everything you did to protect them. No, but I want to know what is core? What is the secret of getting your people safe?
So, first of all, is how you are building. When you are running big collaborative project, there is one key thing is a trust. How to because if we do work together, we have to share sensitive information all the time.
Yeah.
So we have to know each other and to make sure that we have the same understanding about what sharing means, what confidentiality means.
So it all starts with assessing your partners.
Yeah. So we have a memorandum of understanding that is now. At the beginning it was 1 page, now it's 27 pages, and after 8
but
years.
Laurent,
So
a memorandum of understanding. If somebody has bad intentions, it won't help you, will it?
So we are careful about infiltration. We are careful about being hacked. There are the different things that we are doing about safety. First, that we will not start a project if we know that, for instance, the family of the slain journalist will tell us don't do the project because otherwise we will be the next one on the list. So, and it happens many times. Or some people who are jail, around them they told us don't do the project. While in the other way, some people who are currently in jail are telling us, please do the project, and we want you to do the project. So we are assessing the physical risk, the legal risk as well. And so we are making some harmonization call between all lawyers or all legal advisors 1 week before the publication or even 1 month before the publication to make sure that we will all have the same language and we will all be very cautious. So everyone will remain responsible because of the defamation and will differ from one country to another country, but we still need to brainstorm a lot together and to make sure that we have the same understanding about the facts and how we are naming that person of interest, how far we are going about this allegation of corruption, and how serious we were into the request for comment phases. And so that is basically our work at Forbidden Stories, coordinating, facilitating, and minimizing the risk.
Thomas.
Yeah, and also what you're describing is process and method. And I think going back to the point you made about the lone wolf model of journalism, what I like to call the Tintin model of journalism, like it's one guy with a little dog going out into the world and stumbling. And the numbers of times this guy got drugged and hit on the head is astonishing. That he got into that many albums. But I mean, if you want to stay safe and if you don't want to follow the lone wolf model and don't be the isolated journalist, you need to have procedure, and you need to have all these procedure really seriously precede chasing the story or being the first. I vividly remember where we did an investigation that actually started out on Nieuwezijds Voorburgwal, where we had a lead also through Kadaster and Kamer van Koophandel, the Chamber of Commerce.
Thanks for this.
And there was this lead, and it led to a weird constellation of gas stations just on the Belgian border, and we had a hypothesis that there was fraud there with diesel and these people, and we calculated what the fraud would be. It would be in the tens of millions, the fraud just by having a bunch of gas stations there. It's very interesting, but I still remember that on this specific crime family that we were investigating, we couldn't get a safety assessment. We couldn't get a violence assessment from police officers because I think they were annoyed that we found them before they did. And I think the investigation was halted for months before we proceeded, because you just couldn't know if you would end up stumbling into this very violent gang.
Okay, clear. Something else I wanted to address before we go to the audience. In 2024, 122 journalists were killed. Nearly 70% of them worked in Gaza. You say the only way journalists can help each other gain in security is being, with solidarity, being collaborative. How can we help our colleagues in Gaza?
In many ways, even if it's difficult, because it's forbidden to go into the Gaza Strip, but we did the Gaza project with Forbidden Stories, involving many journalists again, and so the goal of the project was to investigate the pattern behind the killing of journalists. Were they targeted precisely because of their activity, or because they were as civilians as others, and journalists in Gaza as survivors amongst the survivors. And they try to do their best to report on what is happening, and they got killed because they are just walking on the street at some point. But we see as well some journalists who were killed right after doing their live for their television, for instance. We have seen as well that a huge majority of journalists have been killed while they were wearing the press vest.
So targeted, but what can we do to protect them, to help them?
So at least what we did with Forbidden Stories and with many partners around the world was to investigate what was happening and how the Israeli government was targeting them. So doing our work, basically investigating the Israeli authorities. We got a lot of sources from inside as well. More and more former soldiers or soldiers are talking as well. And we work with the journalists in Gaza as well to collect testimonies. And we did a lot of analysis of satellite pictures, OSINT investigation as well, to investigate that the killing happened because some quadcopters, some what we call drone sniper, were used to target a journalist, and we know that the operator of the drone was having the knowledge that he was about to kill a journalist, and he killed a journalist. And so we went to the Israeli authorities to ask questions about that, and that's the thing we can do.
And do you have the idea it helps?
Do we have what, sorry?
I mean, do you have any indication that helps?
Yeah, and that's the big question about journalism. How journalism is not ending the war, but we are just part of civil society where we are here to make the powerful accountable and to ask the question they don't want us to ask. any other thing is communication. So we are here to that, and we know what is happening if we stop doing that. And if we start thinking that what we are doing is not changing the world, then we have to do another thing, because we still have to believe in that. And we know as well that in histories that some pictures have changed the perception. We know as well that it's a long effort. So what we did as well with the Gaza project was to pursue the work of some journalists who were killed as they were about to report on the starvation of the population over there. So we document the starvation, how the starvation was produced as well, the famine was organized as well. So
Again, taking over their work.
And I'm very proud of that project, because we did that with journalists from Germany, from the UK, from the US, from Israel, from Palestine. And and that's maybe the topic that is the most dividing topic in the world currently, where everyone can have some perspective, and we did it because we were just focusing on the facts, forgetting about politics, and even despite the political pressure in different kind of countries, we did it, and we will do it again. That's the first time in history that we see that level of journalists being killed.
You say something important. You say we're focusing on the facts. As journalists, we're used to do that. But nowadays, it's less and less evident. What are the facts? How do you cope with that in doing your work? Because you work with whistleblowers, you get sent material. Can you still verify every time what are the facts and what is fake?
There are specialized organizations for that. For instance, people at Bellingcat, people at OCCRP, people at ICIJ.
So you work together with Bellingcat?
Yeah. If you ever get something where you're not entirely sure what the provenance is, there are those international organizations that can vet that for you. No, and I think that's more and more important, where you have to wonder, like, what's the provenance? Why am I being sent?
And we're speaking about Gaza. What other countries do need our support? The situation for journalists is really, really bad.
The list is day after day is growing, is longer.
Yeah.
Like the city, we are about to release another project on IT. But in many places, where Mexico is, of course, Mexico, Yemen, Somalia, Haiti, but as well Philippines. So many countries. What the thing is that what is happening in the US, where you can observe live H24, a democracy falling down with a president that is attacking judge, lawyers, journalists, education, scientists. You see as well how there is a need right now as an emergency to tell the facts, and the question about what the meaning of the facts and how the facts are, how we can give a chance to the facts to surface in that ocean of fake news, and knowing that the algorithm of the tech companies are pushing way more, in a much more offensive way, the fake news. We talked about 1 billion of fake news spread around the world every day. So we as a journalist, we are here to deliver the facts, and that's so complicated because political leaders understood that it's more lucrative and it's more in their interest to produce fake news, to discredit journalists.
It's a business model.
It's a business model. It's a business model where the tech companies understood that there could be a strong alliance between political and tech.
Okay, and then finally, before we go to our audience, Laurent, what do you need from us? You know, like the Dutch audience, Thomas, what do you need from us how can we help?
Well, honestly, that's already a country where we receive a lot of help, and I want to thank as well Veronica Foundation that is with us from the very beginning as well, another foundation in the Netherlands. We need more help than ever, for sure. We are non-profit. So we are non-profit, we accept donation, we welcome donation, not accepting. I should change my storytelling on that.
We started accepting donations again.
Can I make a retake? So that's a way. But the other way is to spread the stories, is basically talking about those stories that journalists have been killed for. And sometimes it's not easy because those stories are complex. It's far away, but it sounds far away, and that's for me. That's the most problematic thing. That when every morning we wake up and we listen to the radio show, to the radio news show, and we heard about another journalist have been killed in Gaza, another journalist have been killed in Mexico, and we years after years we are more and more used to that kind of statistics, and death are becoming metrics and statistics.
Yeah.
And actually, those guys who have been killed in Colombia, for instance, were investigating some multinational who are mining corporation mining over there, and then we are buying those minerals. So it's a French story, it's a Dutch story, it's an American story. Everything is global now. So facing that kind of global crime, we need a global answer, and this is what we try to do.
Okay, thank you. Let me move to you, because I can assume there are some questions for either Laurent or for Thomas. You have a question?
I do. I wrote it down. Give me a second. For Thomas, for Investigo, you're the chief, of course. In the current political climate, do you feel that your organization is under pressure?
Not under violent pressure. I want to make that very clear. We don't receive threats not from the political climate. However, the ease with which government bodies just don't give information. They just don't. Although they are by law required to. The ease with which lying and massaging the truth is now a part of Dutch public government is very, very worrying and very problematic. So you see, for instance, very technically.
Yeah, Thomas, is what you describe now, is that particularly for this last government that just fell, or did you have that before?
This started, I think the disdain for journalism, of course, was very, very visible in this government. However, the famous Rutte doctrine, the idea that being a good public servant is to keep embarrassing information from the public. That was started 12 years ago, and it's still going very strong, and that's very, very problematic. If I just give one more example, was involved with a new report by the Raad voor het Openbaar Bestuur about how to work with public information, and something that they said was very striking. It's like there's just no curiosity within Dutch public administration anymore. This is a point that the ombudsperson in Rotterdam makes. If a journalist comes to you and you're a civil servant and she or he has a question, you should be curious. Like, why are you asking this? Is there corruption? Is there a problem? And the reverse of thing is what we see. Everything shuts down, and it really becomes a job well done when you've stonewalled a journalist. We saw that in one of those information requests, like, we've stonewalled Investigo. It was hard, but we did it. Like, no, you didn't. But
okay, thank you, Thomas. Somebody else. Oh, can I pass this one on? It's always risky for me, but
I'll give it back.
Okay,
yes.
good.
Thank you so much for your inspiring talks. It was mentioned before that you work a lot with other journalists and newspapers, for example. But it was also mentioned that sometimes you have more information than, for example, the police department or the government itself. How do you work together with government bodies or, for example, police agencies or intelligence agencies, if you do at all? I think the question is for both of you.
Thank you.
It's for both of us, I guess. With institution, with political power or police authorities, judicial authorities, we don't work with us. We are questioning them, and the place where we are investigating, most of the time it's likely that they are part of not the crime, but they are covering the crime, and they are part of the impunity. They are protecting the killers. So we are questioning them. We are sending them some requests for comments signed by 50 names of individuals, of journalists from 20 countries. And we are chasing them. And of course, sometimes we do have some sources from inside. Most of the time, The key thing in that period of time as well were not only in the US, but in some countries in Europe, in many parts of the world. I think there is a big need to identify who will be the next whistleblower in those administrations, because something is happening and something is threatening strongly democracies. And so that's the key thing, is to identify people who can provide us some information, but that will be our responsibility to make them safe while they are doing that. And that's when we were talking about processes and safety. It's not only about the safety of the investigation or the safety of the journalists, but the safety of people who are sometimes risking their life to give us a document. And we did a story on Wagner in Africa, in Central Africa. We were in touch for 1 year with one whistleblower who was working for Wagner over there, and he provided us a lot of documents. And then we wait for another year to make sure that he was exfiltrated to another country. And of course, once he was safe and okay with that, we published that. But I can tell you here the numbers of conference calls and people we reach out to make sure that he find the right way to escape his country. And that was really crazy, much more than any kind of fiction. And that's part of our job as well, that protecting our sources.
Thank you.
We have the same attitude. Like, we publish, there's information in what we publish, and if police agencies want to go into that, they should get a newspaper subscription. But what we do not, we do not provide information to for the reason that we are not on the same team.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for this interesting talk. I was just wondering, is there any journalist training that actually prepares for this sort of job, what you were describing? So where do you learn this, and where do you learn the dangers and how to incorporate this?
About training and journalism and how school of journalism, what kind of training school are provided to future journalists. It's true that there is not a lot that is done about collaborative journalism. For instance, last year or 2 years ago, I was teaching at Sciences Po School in Paris, a class of collaborative journalism, and I'm currently inviting all the dean of journalism school in the world to do more classes about collaborative journalism, because I believe it's the future of journalism. And then there is a need for that, and there is a lack of understanding of school of journalism about that, because I think amongst the teacher there are not too many journalists who went through that kind of experience. And actually, when I was teaching that, and I'm doing sometimes classes at Columbia University, for instance, recently, that there is a lot of appetite from the young generation, because there is something different now in the young generation of journalists. And I see that in the classes, because at the time I'm teaching with them, they are still hesitating between becoming a journalist or working for an NGO, but they want to make impact. And so they see journalism as a vehicle to produce impact. While I think 20 years ago, when you wanted to become a journalist, you wanted to be only journalist to get the Pulitzer and to break the story. And now, so that's a big difference. And then going back to the risky fields, it's I think it's mostly experience with others who can
training on the
make a
job.
difference.
Okay, I've got a question here.
Hi. I was wondering, you mentioned Haiti and the Central African Republic, Gaza, of course, working with people on the ground there. What about, we often call like forgotten places such as Sudan or Myanmar, where it's very difficult to reach people and independent journalism maybe doesn't exist?
It's true. There are so many places. One of the most difficult places is China as well. is that how to work over there without endangering sources, and there is a level of surveillance that is so high that is extremely difficult. So we always there are many projects we don't do, and we are just one organization as well. And when you see the level of threats and the number of journalists being killed, we would like to do more and more stories, but there are countries that are so difficult. In the meantime, we do work more and more with journalists living in exile as well, and who can, from exile, and using OSINT, we are more and more setting up some teams to operate from abroad and to investigate from abroad. There is still the question of the safety and security of sources on the field, but that's countries definitely where there is a need.
Thank you.
Hi. Thank you. I have two questions. So my question for Thomas is, when you had this leak from Dubai, can you explain why you decided not to publish the criminals' names? Was it purely for safety?
Purely for safety. Like there's this simple rule in crime reporting is that you do not report on families, the crime family, but not on wives, daughters, that sort of stuff. And you do not expose assets if of criminals. So you don't expose where they've stashed their money in what kind of vastgoed. Real estate. Yeah.
And my question for Laurent is when you had these calls with all the lawyers, how do you... I'm very familiar with this consortium model where all the media outlets decide to publish, to do their own report and then maybe publish simultaneously. But when you're trying to coordinate with lawyers in multiple countries, how you have very different media law in the UK and the US and Europe, what do those conversations look like? Right? I mean, how do you, in terms of naming people, what you can say, what you can allege?
Yeah. So first of all, from a legal standpoint, the collaboration is bringing much more protection because it's going to be for potential attackers, like state actors or corporation, when they will understand receiving the request for comment like 10 days before the publication, they will understand that, okay, it's not only one newspaper from the UK, there is also the Le Monde from France, there is also the Washington Post or others, and so that will be way more difficult for them to set up a strategy to before the publication or after the publication to attackers or to attack one of us. So that's one of the good things with the collaboration. Then we are still for some investigation organizing some calls between lawyers. The way we proceed is to listen first to the partner that is based in the country where the defamation regulation is the most offensive. And so we always think about the most vulnerable partner, and we will adapt based on his ability to produce that level of information. In the UK, for instance, the regulation is extremely about defamation. It's so expensive for a newspaper, for a journalist to defend himself, even if he's going to win at the end. So we are very, very careful. The way to be very careful, even and to avoid having too many letters from lawyers, is as well the level of fact checking. So we work more and more with strong fact checkers coming from outside our newsroom, who are fact checking every single fact. Even if we say that I meet that person on a Tuesday, November 14, and it was raining in Amsterdam, and then that person gave me a file that indicate that this owner didn't pay his tax, for instance. We ask our fact checker to fact check everything, the temperature, if it was raining or not. Why it's so important to fact check the weather? Because if one person, if the journalist is wrong with his memory, and it was actually sunny, if one person is observing that, and then on Twitter, on the platform, we say, oh, actually, this story is bullshit story because
indicative of all the
because he was wrong on the weather. So how it could be true on the tax avoidance issue is pretending to reveal. So it's about dealing with that kind of crisis ahead of the publication, and so it's an exercise that is extremely important. And then we go to the lawyers and we are providing all the footnotes, and then they see that the fact-checking process has been done before, and then it's better to be on the same page after that.
And also what you try to do is, as far as possible, make clear what the sources are from, where your statements are from. Like in these and these records, we found that. Always have this sort of staccato way, and always refer to your sources, because that makes makes it harder to litigate.
Thank you. I think it's time for a last question of tonight. Yeah, the honor is yours.
I have 3 questions.
We don't have time for that, so you have to choose the best one.
Oh God. You can choose which one. 2 practical questions for Laurent. How do you do that, the psychological care for the people that are working, like practically? What does that look like? 2, how does a journalist warn their potential killers that they are with you? I mean, maybe how do you get the message across? And 3, if this is so antithetical to journalism, what you're doing, working together, how did we get there? How did egoism get a grip on journalism? It sounds so counterintuitive for people that should be showing interest in other people.
Thank you. Laurent, which one do you choose?
Yeah. Sorry, I forget the first one. I wanted to answer the psychological one, which is an important one. So first of all, the way practically we do that, we have one therapist that has worked for years with other newsroom that we know, with reporters, and that is specialized with trauma experienced by reporters, and that we are basically providing for any members of our staff some sessions. It's not only about indicating them the way to reach out to the therapist, but it's about what is important as well. It's for them to tell us that they are suffering. So we can do something. We can be informed of that. There is also you can have as well someone suffering by watching too many pictures on social networks, and there is the vicarious trauma that you got because you are investigating through OSINT. You want to analyze the way that journalist has been killed, and then you get 3 CCTV plus 2 drone footage, and then you are analyzing that, and you spend hours and hours on the body of the person, and then that could be extremely difficult. And then your second question about how to make sure that the killers will be aware. That's that's a very important question, and that's really the core of our strategy. So the one way we do, so there are different ways. First of all, we always work with local partners to make sure that, because the killers of Rafael Moreno, they are not reading the Washington Post, they are not reading the Guardian. And so what we did basically is that we did some. So first of all, we work with local partners in Colombia that do have a large audience in Colombia. Then we did sponsor some content on YouTube that everyone who was watching any kind of video in 30 kilometers around the killing, so where the administration was, everyone who was watching a video on YouTube was first seeing the trailer of the Rafael project. So we pay that, and the reach was really huge. And so that's and we have other ideas to involve more content creators as well in the area where the killing took place, to involve them in the consortium, and so they can tell to their big audience on TikTok or on Instagram, for instance, the outcome of the stories, making sure that the killers will be aware that the story survive.
Yeah, well, thank you, Thomas Muns, and thank you, Laurent Richard. Thank you all for being here. Well, Laurent, as you explained to us this super important story that your raison d'être of your organization is, to take on the stories of people who can't do it themselves anymore. You've delivered here a story that we, I think, have to take on further, because we have to do our work on that as well. How do we in journalism get rid of the egos when there's like a risk in a story? How do we endow each other's security by cooperating and providing solidarity? Fact-checking, I think it's a very underdeveloped thing in Dutch journalism. We could learn a lot from that in different news, international news outlets. So let's continue this discussion. There's so many good things about the Balie, but one good thing is that the discussion always goes on at the bar. So this is not an end. This is just an invitation saying thank you for now. Check out the other programs in this fantastic. These fantastic days, Art Against Tyrants. But for now, thank you and see you again at the Balie. Thank you.